We are all one people. We all come from one creation way on high. We are all one nation under one great sky, you and I. We are all one people. We are all one color in her eye.
The Spanish influenza was one of history's worst pandemics, with estimates at the death toll of 20 million people worldwide. The Sturgeon Lake First Nation was also affected by the pandemic of 1918. Until now, the effects of the sickness, or Gaimagoksuin, to the people of the community have not been documented. The reconstruction of events through historical documents and narratives supplied by Sturgeon Lake elders of the 1918 pandemic is the first picture of what happened in the community during that time. The people of Sturgeon Lake lived in self-constructed log houses during 1918. Most of these log houses were well built with shingled roofs and were chinked and whitewashed. Indian Affairs sessional papers dating to 1909 state that many of the houses on this reserve are roomy, comfortable, and of a better class than many of those occupied by settlers in the vicinity. In 1918, households would have been dispersed in the community east to west, but there were a few clusters of houses at the east end and at the west end. There were also farms throughout the community. The profile of the Sturgeon Lake people in the period preceding the 1918 pandemic is extracted from Indian Affairs reports from that time. For example, the report for 1909 states that the Sturgeon Lake people were energetic in anything they undertake and are independent and somewhat high-spirited in disposition. They are largely pagan in religion and love a nomadic life. Their opportunities enable them to make a considerable amount of money. The 1911 Indian Affairs report states that the Sturgeon Lake people were generally of an active, energetic type and are through practice the best axemen of the agency. Farming operations are usually left to the younger members. The 1912 report states that Sturgeon Lake people rely little on grain raising, derive more support from cattle through yearly sales to lumbering companies, secure profitable employment in logging camps, and obtain their chief meat supplies by hunting. Clearly, the people of Sturgeon Lake in 1918 were industrious and were very active in community life. They took advantage of opportunities for employment in a mixed economy and were generally proud of their abilities to look after and provide for their families. The independent and proud people of the community were to have their spirits tested by the events that followed.
Stigi hai mano tehas. Hagi peswa pasta mano mai itaskino te go gmina iskino. Mi chete pe apmak. Yksi piu magai mahau suonolta hagi tago temaga. Mi chete isino gi sipuetio. Ewa mina. Egunego gagiatos ketchugota. Kana hiniguitsik. Tahtuki sigao. Eugtegi ettohtetsik. Asamine egunegan muya. Muit mat rotegi twehmana. Atihtai sino. Joshua tehtas. Eusegis nagattagoya komotak taskina. Euspihai makomauksun gagit muhtemaga.
Some sources state that the Spanish flu originated in China in February 1918, but did not reach Canada until September of that year. As with any other community faced with the flu, the community of Sturgeon Lake would have been unprepared for the health crisis they faced in terms of planning. What is certain is the swiftness with which the Spanish flu raced through communities once it hit.
Muy pet sapahtamal suovege gammakisiga. Tagahtit nakuistan maksun agit muhtemaga kutta haimane gammakiva. That's which one teeti. Egunnegani kahki okinegattukuno. Egi peatsumutsuug maanagatuskeetsuguta ka pegiesik. Ka puinatuskeet. Yeksipa gaasai. Ha. Egunnegani yaatsumanekinnegattukuno. Egi utisto pahtamana egumego kektimaga kutak tatskina. Egspihan maga kai maka sunga muhtemaga.
People starting to get sick in the fall of 1918 would have had some form of flu symptoms. The community people that became sick during the fall of 1918 would have initially felt regular flu symptoms such as headaches, chills, cough, fever, and muscle ache. These flu symptoms would not have alarmed people because the regular flu would have been a typical seasonal condition experienced before. It is uncertain how many people from the community and from different households would have been sick at this stage. We can assume that there may have been 20% or about 40 to 50 people that suffered the disease to some extent. Many as well should have recovered from the early stages of the flu and may have acquired immunity to the onset of the more serious stages of the Spanish flu itself. There was no cure or vaccine for the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu was spread principally by human contact, chiefly through coughs and sneezing. Moist secretions from the nose and throat of infected persons can spread the disease through the sharing of utensils such as cups, or spread through crowds because the germ can live for a short time outside of the body. Elder Turner seems to suggest that a sickness started from the east and spread its way to the west end of the community. He stated that, and I quote, "In time, the people from the west also had the same experiences," unquote.
Kapiako muta. Sipigamasi. Ewa minote. Sipigamahuti. Eksumegi atis sepaste tsugo kumagan no.
The Spanish flu developed from the initial condition of regular flu and its symptoms. Many of those people from Sturgeon Lake that got sick would have started to feel severe symptoms as the sickness progressed into full-blown Spanish flu. Practically, the great danger from influenza is pneumonia, which tends to follow in considerable percentage of the cases. With the added dangers of pneumonia, the sickness turned nasty and swift. As an individual progressed into the dangerous levels of the sickness, the fever would begin early. Their temperature would be about 103 degrees. The devastating sickness was uncompromising in its effects. Entering the final stages of the sickness, the person would start coughing up blood caused by severe obstruction of the lungs, and the nostrils would eventually get blocked, probably complicated by the pneumonia. As the person became sicker in the final moments, the virus caused an uncontrollable hemorrhaging that filled the lungs. In these final and tortuous minutes, it is said that the agonizing experience of the sick was the sense of chemical burn searing the lungs. The person's face would become flushed or have a blue tint. In the end, the sick persons would drown in their own bodily fluids. These were the final sad moments of the sick. As the sickness took its toll, they inhaled their last breaths. Then there was silence. There were 21 relatives that died in Sturgeon Lake during the Spanish influenza of 1918. These were our relatives who loved and were loved by their families. Once proud and energetic, they had now lost the battle to a silent, unseen killer. Each person that succumbed to the devastating sickness was a painful loss not only to the immediate family but also to the entire community. Naytowhow, the Charlz family lost one man. The Long John family lost one woman. Chief Thomas Charlz lost one girl. David Anderson's family lost one girl. Alex Badger lost one man. The John Moosehunter family lost one girl. Albert McDougall's family lost one girl. Fred Ballandine lost one man and one boy. Alex Naytowhow's family lost one man. John Badger and family lost one boy. James Peter lost one girl and one boy. Roger Daniel lost one man and one woman. John Crane lost one man and one girl. Louis Daniels' family lost one woman. The response of the community people of Sturgeon Lake to the devastation of the 1918 Spanish influenza was remarkable. The people's response emanated from the roots of their culture that had passionately guided them through their existence in years previous. There was the physical response, or the arms and legs of the community, that triggered the workers into action as they went from house to house to care for the sick and to tend to the family tasks that sick families were not able to do. There was the emotional response, the engagement of the community heart and soul, where the natural tendency for people was to care for and console the sick and their anguished families. There was also the mental response, the thoughtfulness of the community, evidenced by the way response teams were activated and the way news was relayed throughout the community with the passing of each relative. Elder Baptiste Turner also talks about the spiritual response, how people dealt with great unknowns, where the old people used traditional means of spirituality to help the people in the time of suffering and grief. A great majority of the people followed Aboriginal belief, and this would have ensured that they used traditional medicines and spiritual protection. Indeed, many families were left untouched by the sickness.
Ego he wena go gatsima ko ha ke to skata ko mota. He na hine go tikta to gisiga. Ke ta to ege tetto. Ham so to manista ta supportia. No into pagas mon pitama. Ka supportit. Uta. Sayani. Tentoge tayon che pagas mo che. E when you guys see no. Much pay out so no got number.
Alissa Henneque also remembers the support that people gave to each other. She states, a certain old man, a close neighbor of ours, went about looking after the sick, going into each of the houses, for the people were extremely sick, and there were so many who died. He went about hauling wood and filling up the water supply, doing everything. And when he had finished one house, he went to the next. That old man did not get sick. That old man was a widower. Workers who did not get sick were kept extremely busy looking after the necessities during this difficult period. Alissa Henneque recalls that I would be looking out and see them being driven by on their way to burial. The coffins were simply piled up one on top of the other. The dead were going to be buried. In the community of Sturgeon Lake, the 21 people that died in the year 1918 would have been mostly young adults. The Spanish influenza was an unusual strain in that this pandemic killed many young adults and otherwise healthy people. Those who tended to be vulnerable were those between the ages of 20 and 40. In Sturgeon Lake, there were 14 young people that died in 1918, and others that died but were listed as men and women could have been young adults as well, under 40 years old.
Na inu go on ge sigati. Ik tai sino ge na inis. Vi se. Umutaka ko tata ko tamat not. Ik te ga sini panas. Ege na inis. Pis ko mutani sai gat not skine se wa mina go ko magan na ge spotit. Vi sto gute. Uta. Papa si gute.
Also by comparable standards, with a current population of over 2,000 people in Sturgeon Lake, a 10.8% loss of population today would mean over 200 people. Elder Turner states that the Spanish influenza of 1918 left a demographic imprint in our community. If it were not for the influenza, where many relatives died, we would have a much bigger population today in the community.
Ano skagi sigag. Kagi kwalgate na no. Igu mi set enagatta ko ya ko kumagan na ko tais ko na gani ekspihan ma. Kay makakson gapin pay.
In other communities, it is reported that grave diggers to bury the dead were scarce in the communities, and that in some cases, mass graves were dug and otherwise bodies were buried without coffins. In Sturgeon Lake, Elder Baptiste Turner tells us,
Peace. We saw kumagan no go this baksimuta. Egon gan give me no isto. Ega gitti pista chugo maksun. Ego mi set egi van ha kumagan. Juswa tepsis. Pega hekta. Este va ego askana. Estas chigan gekte suswa tepsis egi mamo pegan megi usita. Ego askan. Ega otra sita chikta pues. Te quet vitista chick esgata chigigo. Te quet pista chick ai si no te nagatto. Tu squata poi porque pesta, vai ne wait mat so eu ne supuesto eu segui egi peito e chigai sino. Igual ni stegi o apartamento egum.
there are some lessons to be learned from examining the history of the 1918 Spanish influenza as it affected the community of Sturgeon Lake. Understanding these lessons can help the community deal with future pandemics should they occur. These lessons are as follows. 1. Ground zero for the Spanish flu's impact was on individuals and their families within their homes. It is urgent that individuals and their families become aware about pandemics and what to do in households in the event that one strikes. Number 2. Community people in 1918 did not see the sickness coming and were not informed about the devastating nature of the Spanish flu. It is important that the people know about the nature of pandemics and to involve them in response strategies. Number 3. Physical contact seemed to have played a major role in the spread of the 1918 pandemic within the community. It would be critical to make the community aware of hygiene, quarantine, and ways of limiting physical contact in the event of a pandemic. Number 4. Community support is vital in a crisis situation. People in a community who escaped the sickness were very active in providing support to families for the daily necessities and, importantly, with the grim tasks of community burials. Number 5. The 1918 situation showed that the village settings had more incidences of the sickness as opposed to the outlying households. It will be critical to monitor and place special emphasis on villages during a pandemic. Number 6. Elders will be required to perform the necessary ritual and ceremony for the deceased and to console grieving families. Elders and other spiritualists such as healers will be important in the event of a health crisis in the community. Number 7. Traditional medicines and spiritual protection were observed for the protection of the people. Indeed, many families were not touched by the 1918 Spanish influenza. The people that died in 1918 were our relatives. It is the people's responsibility to look after one another and to collectively grieve and mourn any losses because in the end, we are all one people.